Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. That was a pretty half-hearted speech, and I completely understand why. Absolutely understand why. That's because that member was a member of the Health Select Committee, and he thinks about the issues, and he knows that this bill does very, very little to progress the issues that everyone in this House cares passionately about. If this is the war on P, I don't think we've even got the pistol, let alone anything to truly deal with the drug problem in New Zealand. That member knows, because he sat at the Select Committee and listened to people saying, you seriously want to ban the import of pipes and you think that will do something? You seriously want to take flu tablets off the pharmacy shelves and you think that will fix anything? People were laughing at the Minister during the Select Committee process because this really just doesn't meet the standard that we should be debating. I don't understand why this has gone backwards and forward in the Minister's mind, the Honourable Peter Dunn's mind, until suddenly he had a complete change of heart for the fourth time and said we've got to do something urgently and dramatically, immediately, and introduce this bill, which really, it won't do any harm. Won't do any harm at all. It is taking up some of the Parliament's time, that's right, valid part of democracy, but it certainly won't take the sort of action that we need to deal with issues like P and like chronic. So I'm just disappointed. I thought the Minister had a bit more innovation within his portfolio mandate, but he doesn't seem to have. I read the Attorney-General's comments with some concern because and I'm surprised that Minister Finlayson isn't here to take a call and explain why he's now silent on the issue of concern that he raised in relation to this bill, which was by saying we're going to take the cold and flu tablets off the pharmacy shelves and make them prescription only. We are looking at a presumption of supply when purchasing those previously non-prescription medications. That presumption of supply, I think, is unfair on the overwhelming majority of New Zealanders who go into the chemist to buy their cold and flu tablets. Guess why? Because they've got a bad cold or because they've got the flu and want something immediate to deal with it. Now, why are those people now being required to buy something which may or may not be as effective as what they've been using, or go to the doctor? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And Dr. Paul Hutchison was also at the Select Committee, and he would have been paying attention, I know, because that's how he is wont to behave at the Select Committee. He would have listened to the submitters laughing at the fact that the problem we have with pea manufacture in New Zealand doesn't come from our chemist shops. It comes from the illegal importation of ingredients, overwhelmingly, over 80%. So we're scratching a little bit, and at the same time the national members are parading up and down the country saying we've declared this war on drugs. Well, it's just laughable. Just laughable. Mr. Speaker, the second point I want to raise is actually a much more serious one because it does do something, and it does something that I think is wrong, and that's in relation to Part 4 of this bill. I spoke to a man recently who was moving to New Zealand. He brought with him his huge container of goods, and when he went to collect it from Lyttelton Port, he was told that he had some questions to answer because some of the contents of the container had been confiscated. One of these items was a hookah, a pipe, and the customs people had referred it to the police who took it all to pieces and investigated it and said it was clearly an item that had been purchased as a souvenir, had never been used for smoking anything legal or illegal in it. But he had it confiscated. He had to go through a big investigation. But the most interesting point, and I want the Minister to comment on this, in relation to the fairness or unfairness of it. He may have the opportunity over the dinner break to get some advice, Mr Chairman. He may have the opportunity over the dinner break to get some advice on whether this is correct procedure or whether my constituent actually has just fallen foul of incompetence. But despite the fact that the police said there is nothing legal or illegal on this pipe, there is no reason for any charges to be considered. Clearly the man had bought this pipe as a souvenir and bought it along with all his other goods. They refused to return it to him. Now, the question I'd like to pose to the Minister is, does he think that that's fair? It would be different if there was something illegal on that pipe, but this was clearly a souvenir. He's never got his blessed hooker back. No, I think he should have it. He didn't do anything wrong. It's legal to buy, it's legal to import, didn't have anything illegal on it. Is the same thing going to happen if my colleague Ian Les-Galloway's supplementary order paper is not supported, now that we're going to clamp down on all these other drug utensils and identifiable parts as they're described in the bill? I think that section of the bill is just a nonsense. It is a totally interfering way of approaching people who may be doing no harm, like my constituent, and may end up being caused a lot of anxiety and grief for no good reason. This won't help the drug problem that we have in New Zealand. This won't go any way towards it. It's just an absolute nonsense. And I'm surprised that the Minister, who has so often referred to solutions as being those of common sense, would allow his name to be attached to this ridiculous clause. This is a great opportunity this evening and tomorrow as we debate through the committee stages for the Minister to just quietly support Ian Les-Galloway's SOP and we can get rid of this nonsensical provision. The final point I want to make, Mr Chairman, is the inconsistency of us dealing with this piece of the overall drug abuse requirements outside of the Law Commission report. It is very unusual, and actually it's an inconsistent way of this government dealing with issues. I don't know if it's that the other issues are too hard and are therefore being put off because this government doesn't like dealing with tough issues, or whether they needed some sort of declaration of action and picked this little thing up rather than waiting for the comprehensive response from the Law Commission. But either way, for whatever reason, it is inconsistent with how this government has previously dealt with issues. It has approached matters alongside the Law Commission's report, and I don't understand why it isn't doing it in this regard. We should be looking at the recommendations from the Law Commission. Mr Chairman, the Misuse of Drugs Act is clearly outdated. It was written in the mid-70s. Drugs were different then. The use of them was different then, and the way that we respond as a society should be different and keep up with changing use and abuse of drugs. The only thing that hasn't kept pace with the change is the law itself. So we need a comprehensive look at misuse of drugs, how we can ensure that the focus of our legislation is reducing harm to individuals and our communities. That should be the centre, not this ad hoc, bitsy, punitive approach that, as the Attorney-General said, assumes that people are buying their cold and flu tablets at the chemist because they're going to supply for some illegal purpose. That is just a nonsense. It's a very shallow way of dealing with what I think New Zealanders have overwhelmingly accepted is a problem that we should all work constructively together to do. I think that the Minister would have been better off to ensure that we had a total cross-party agreed response to this, so that we would have an enduring solution that had been well considered and well debated, at least amongst the various parties in Parliament. And that's the way the Minister often talks in public as a good way of operating, less of this confrontational arguing party versus party, and more along the way of getting agreement that we have a problem, looking at all the options and overseas experience, looking at evidence in terms of responding to that problem, and then trying to get as much across different parties' political support as possible.
Dr. Paul Hutchison.